NECA is taking care of business. This is your look at the NECA Toys Elvis on Tour commemorative action figure. The King of Rock and Roll has arrived. NECA is proud to announce that Elvis Presley, the best-selling solo musician of all time, will be joining their line of 7-inch action figures. The NECA studio artists have recreated Elvis's live in-concert appearance from the spring of 1972 in painstaking detail. Wearing a white jumpsuit decorated in various sequins and jewelry, he is sculpted to precision in the iconic cape spread pose. Well, I'm all shook up. Before we get a closer look at the King of Rock and Roll, obviously the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall this figure stands. I almost feel like I don't want to call it a figure, because that's not what it is. If you're looking for articulation on Elvis Presley here, you're really not going to get it, as what he is instead is a pre-posed statue. Nonetheless, though, Elvis Presley stands 5.6 inches in height. We can switch that to centimeters, revealing that the figure is 14.2 centimeters tall. I would like to thank the folks over at NECA Toys that provided the sample of Elvis Presley from his 1972 concert run near the end of his life. Well, I guess he still had a good handful of years ahead of him. As a big fan of Elvis Presley, somebody who grew up in a household whose father was obsessed with the King of Rock and Roll, even to the extent that we took a road trip to Memphis, Tennessee, simply so we could do the tour of Graceland, the place where Elvis Presley called home. So I feel like I'm a good, strong person to talk about the King of Rock and Roll here. And what we're essentially getting with this figure release is not even so much a figure as it is a pre-posed statue. When I looked at this figure and immediately getting him out of the packaging, I knew he was going to be pretty limited on articulation. And that's not really the whole point of this figure. What it is instead is it's a sculpted statue that you can put on the shelf and just admire for the fact it has good-looking paint and good-looking sculpt. When I'm looking at this figure, it kind of reminds me of the old days of the McFarlane toys, where sculpt and paint played a heavier role than the articulation on the figure. And I feel like NECA Toys have gone the same route here with the Elvis Presley release. That being said, let's get a closer look at the figure. I'm going to pick him up. I suppose we could talk about its articulation right away, because there really isn't very much at all. He doesn't have any articulation, for example, in his head. He has just a very little amount of articulation in his hands, but you'll see that his hands are supposed to attach to the corners of his cape anyways, so there's really not much that you can do there. The figure also does have articulation in his waist, so you can rotate that back and forth, and he does have articulation in his boots, though that will dictate how well it stands when you put it on display. I wouldn't advise maybe rotating the boot too far to the extreme, because obviously that's going to throw off the pose of when you get this guy planted down on a shelf, for example. But again, what you're getting here is a statue rendition of Elvis. I don't know if necessarily we are going to be getting ourselves fully articulated Elvis Presley figures, or if this is basically what we're going to be getting from NECA Toys. Kind of like iconic poses that Elvis would be seen in, just done as plastic statues. Getting a closer look at his face. His face is pretty good. Slightly fuller, of course. This is Elvis Presley, 72, and I think he died in 78. Far past the years of his comeback special, so he was much fuller here, and he was tend to be wearing more of the sequin jumpsuits that he would be known for later wearing in his later years of his performances. The head sculpt is actually really good on this guy. Again, he's slightly fuller in the face, but I think the paint's pretty good on him as well. He has the slightly fuller pork chop sideburns there on either sides of his face, and of course slightly longer hair too. Get a closer look at his face there. I do like the fact that they sculpted his mouth open, so you've got some visible teeth there as well. It almost seems like they've added just a little bit of pink just below his eyelids, just right there as well. Just a little bit of extra warmth to his face. Now, of course, on the other side, for his hands at least, you can see he's got what seems almost to be either a wristwatch or bracelet there on his one wrist. You can see on the other, he's got something similar on this side as well. The king was known for wearing lots of jewelry, and you can see very much the case here. It is a watch. He's right there. He's got a ring there on his finger. But again, like nothing really on this is supposed to move. What you're seeing is what you're getting here. I do like the fact that he's got his corners of his cape spread out like an eagle. Let's spin this statue around so you can see the back of it. really nice detailing that they incorporated here. Now again, these would be heavily sequined and jeweled up. So for example, you've got a center section here that fans out. And imagine that all of these would have been hand done and applied to the backs of Elvis's capes. And he's got these little kind of snowflake jewel formations there on the ends as well. Spin the statue again around. I keep wanting to calling it a statue because if you're looking for an articulated version of the king, you're really not going to be getting it here. Nice detailing done there on his belt. Again, just imagine how expensive these jumpsuits were. I think at one point near the end of his concert runs, Elvis had considered doing a laser jumpsuit that actually would omit laser beams. And obviously that never came about because Elvis Presley had died several years after that. I do like the wrinkles that they've actually added to the pants, for example, where of course that would be stretched across his legs. And equally that, I also like the coloring that they did to the interior of the cape, giving it a slight metallic pink color. If we spin it again around, I want to also show you guys what they've done here on the corners of the cape. Obviously, the way he's pulling it, he's holding it gripped in either one of his hands. And naturally, you see the wrinkles developing there where they should. Because after all, if he's going to be pulling and tugging that in the corners, it's going to be stretching that cape along the way as well. Again, we just spin this around. It does lead me to think, I wonder if NECA Toys will be giving us fully articulated Elvis figures, or if this is basically what we're going to be getting. Elvis kind of seen through his various different concert runs. Aloha from Hawaii, the comeback special, for example. Or, like again, when he heavily started getting into these jumpsuits. A nice little touch as well is that they also painted in a little hair on his chest, along with a cross. Elvis was very religious after all. Overall, again, I'm really happy with this one for what it is. Now, again, you have to kind of keep in mind exactly what you're getting with this. You're not necessarily getting an articulated version of Elvis Presley. Instead, what you're getting is you're getting a pre-posed statue. Yes, there is some articulation. There's articulation in the boots. There's articulation where you can swivel at the waist. And there's just a little bit also in the hands. But none of it is really things where if you start turning it, it's going to improve the look of this statue. Because if you start twisting the wrist or twisting the waist, for example, then obviously it's going to make Elvis look a little disjointed. It's not going to look really quite right. So again, I think when it comes to displaying this guy, I'm going to keep him OG as he appears out of the packaging. I'm not going to start twisting and changing things about because I don't really feel like that's going to benefit and improve the look of this. Overall, really happy with how this one turned out. Again, it makes me really think whether if this is going to be a one and we're done sort of scenario, or if NECA Toys plans a whole range of different Elvis releases. At the very least, if we're still going to be getting ourselves like these staction-based figures, I would love to see maybe more concert versions of Elvis Presley, like his comeback special, like Aloha from Hawaii, for example. There's like enough Elvis to go around, and hopefully this is the start of something new. Earlier into this review, I think I had compared NECA's release of Elvis Presley to some of the stuff that we were getting from McFarlane Toys early into the 2000s, where back in the day, McFarlane Toys was more heavily into sculpting and paint than they were articulated action figures. And I really much get that same vibe when I'm looking at Elvis on tour here, the commemorative action figure. Because again, he's not so much an action figure where you can pose and move his arms and his limbs and his legs and his head. Instead, you're pretty much getting a staction statue that you can be putting on display instead. And I like that. It doesn't always have to be articulated figures from NECA Toys. I like that they're doing something different. And of course, there's always going to be fans of Elvis Presley. I think this one works well in the sense that you're just going to be putting this on a shelf display and you're kind of looking at it as a pre-posed statue. It's not to say, though, that NECA Toys doesn't eventually give us articulated Elvis figures. I'd be certainly on board getting articulated Elvises as well. But I think this one works well for what it's supposed to be. It doesn't ask itself of being anything more than just a statue. And I think for that, it's successful. The head sculpt is good. The paint is good. And I like the detailing that they did to his jumpsuit, incorporating all those rhinestones and sequins that Elvis was known for having with his various different jumpsuits. Definitely as an Elvis fan, I would say, yes, worth picking up if you see this one in the shelves. But just know, though, that when you're picking this one up, you're not really going to be getting any articulation from this figure. Instead, what you're getting essentially is a statue. A big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that provide the sample of Elvis on tour, the commemorative action figure. If you're a big fan of Elvis, let me know down below in the comments section. As your video question for today is, what's your favorite Elvis Presley song? Always like reading your comments down below. And make sure as well, if you're new to the channel and you're liking all the content you're seeing, that you'd consider hitting the subscribe button down below. You'd consider turning on the bell notification, and you'd consider coming back to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as that's when we'll have new videos popping up. I will also say that we're going to be having a whole bunch of new NECA reviews also lined up and coming your way. So forever, always and always, keep those peepers ever so peeled. Oh, that's really gross. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.